Michael Bloomberg has set his sights on frontrunner Bernie Sanders. Bloomberg's campaign has hit Sanders on the perceived toxicity of his online fan base and has attacked members of Bernie's campaign leadership directly for what it calls unacceptable attacks. Let's bring in National Press Secretary for the Sanders campaign, Briahna Gray. Briahna, always good to see you. Thanks for coming on. Bloomberg is rising in the polls. We just showed that NPR Marist poll a moment ago that has him not quite where Bernie Sanders is, but certainly much higher than he was a couple months ago when he announced. When you're on the debate stage tomorrow, how much do you take Bloomberg into consideration, given the momentum that he is building underneath him?
Well, first and foremost, I want to highlight the momentum that the Sanders campaign is building with a double-digit lead over the next most popular candidate. We have really emerged as the frontrunner in this race, and we've done so in large part because of the support from diverse populations, including Latinos, who support we have 64% of, according to recent polls. And moreover, we are number 2 with Black voters and closing in fast on number 1 with only three points behind Vice President Biden. So to your question about Bloomberg, of course, we have to consider everyone who's on that stage. And what's a really great aspect of this for Bernie Sanders is that he has spent his entire career talking about the negative influence of money in politics, how people who are enormously affluent, like Michael Bloomberg, who has $60 billion in wealth, are able to do things like buy our democracy. So I really look forward to a conversation about the difference between a candidate like Bernie Sanders, who has more people have given to his campaign than any campaign in the history of presidential candidacies, compared to someone like Michael Bloomberg, who's completely self-funded and as a result is accountable to no one, not the voters, not Americans, nobody but himself.
You are going to get that chance tomorrow night, and you're going to get that chance presumably in debates going forward if Michael Bloomberg continues to qualify for those debates. How, though, beyond the debates, how in individual states where Michael Bloomberg is spending millions and millions and millions of dollars, where every commercial break in a TV show has a Michael Bloomberg ad, where everybody who opens up Instagram sees a Michael Bloomberg ad, or Facebook sees a Michael Bloomberg ad, or they go to, or they're near a rally and they see everybody walking around with Mike Bloomberg t-shirts that were given to them by the Michael Bloomberg campaign. How do you, in these individual states, go out there, especially on Super Tuesday when it's many states at once, and compete on that same level?
Look, anyone who is concerned with an oligarch becoming president, anyone who's concerned about the fact that Michael Bloomberg has spent more than every candidate in this race, every non-billionaire candidate in this race combined on advertisements, should be thrilled about the fact that we have in Bernie Sanders a candidate who actually has that organic support that Michael Bloomberg is spending so much money to pay for. So with Bernie Sanders, you have record crowd sizes, including the crowd we just had in Washington State last night with over 17,000 people in attendance. You have grassroots enthusiasm. You have volunteers coming out at record numbers. You have people, yes, posting and creating organic memes in support of the candidate. And without that kind of grassroots enthusiasm, without that kind of donor base, people who are giving small dollar donations, without a candidate like Bernie Sanders who has more union support than every other candidate in this race combined, it's going to be an uphill battle beating someone like Michael Bloomberg, who can just use his enormous wealth to buy this election.
You have the talking point of Michael Bloomberg as a billionaire, and you believe he's trying to buy this election. People who do not support Bernie Sanders will say, I do not support a socialist. I know he calls himself a democratic socialist, but that can get lost in the mix. Are you concerned that some of that labeling won't work to your advantage? In fact, will work against you when voters are considering between maybe if it is just a Michael Bloomberg versus a Bernie Sanders?
I think what will work to our advantage is the fact that every Democratic presidential candidate in my lifetime, at least, has been called a socialist, including, we all remember, Barack Obama. And the thing about Bernie Sanders
himself calls himself a Democratic
of course,
socialist,
so
and he's not going to say, I'm not going to call myself that any longer, I'm just going to call myself a Democrat.
No, but Katie, the point that I'm making is that Bernie Sanders is the most trusted senator in America. He's one of the most liked politicians in America because people understand that he has nothing to hide. So to the extent that that label was intended to imply that somehow someone had a shadowy agenda, when you poll voters, do you prefer a democratic socialist? Many of them say no. But when you ask voters who you prefer, Bernie Sanders or the other candidates in the race, the answer is Bernie Sanders, because they know what he stands for. They know when he talks about democratic socialism, he's talking about a theory of government that puts people first, that puts laborers first, workers first, that says healthcare is a human right, and that we shouldn't allow Wall Street titans like Bloomberg to attack Social Security, as he said he will do. As someone who would say he has never supported a minimum wage raise, as he has said repeatedly, someone who has backed a racist criminal justice regime in New York City that was declared unconstitutional by New York courts, as Mayor Bloomberg has done. People trust what your record is. And right now, Bernie Sanders has the benefit of having a long record to run on, whereas Michael Bloomberg has a long record he has trying very hard to run away from.
Michael Bloomberg does have issues in his record, and we've covered them extensively here. He does have positives, though, that people will point to, and I'll just name a few of them. He funds every town for gun safety, more than $3 million in 2018. He's put $110 million on Democrats and their causes in 2018 alone, $200 million to fight climate and environmental issues, $100 million on anti-smoking initiatives. Yes, this is his money, but there will be people who point to that and say he's leading and he's putting his money where his mouth is on causes that I deeply care about. He's getting things done.
Yeah, and for years, Michael Bloomberg also funded Republican candidates who are anti-climate change advocacy. He was a speaker at the RNC in supportive of George W. Bush and his war in Iraq. And he is someone who has shown to pick a political team according to the particular whims of the moment. And he's not someone who I believe Americans can trust with an agenda that actually puts people first. He's someone who is very close friends and who is, we all know, to play golf frequently with our current president. And now we're supposed to believe that all of a sudden,
I don't know if that's an adequate characterization. I know there are photos of the two of them
I'll leave it up for him to characterize their friendship. He has spoken positively in the recent history, as you can see in the many videos that are circulating around social media by Americans who are very concerned about the direction this country is going in, that Michael Bloomberg isn't someone you can depend on with the faith, with the confidence of the working class people in this country. And the reality is the money that Bloomberg has spent on charitable giving is equivalent to me buying a bus ticket right back to New York City. And so when you have someone who has worth $60 billion, who earns more in interest on his wealth in a year than the other billionaire in the race has in his entire wealth, you have to take these things into context, Katie, and understand that he is able to purchase trust, or he is endeavoring anyway, to purchase his way into the hearts and minds of Americans in a way that is not going to hold up against the scrutiny of Donald Trump in a general election, who is going to be able to exploit his record in the same way that we saw him exploit the record of the Democratic nominee in 2016, accusing him of being a Wall Street candidate, accusing him of being in the pocket of big money interest, and accusing him also of having a terrible record of criminal justice, etc. The Democratic Party does not need to be bogged down with that kind of negative history when we're supposed to be the party that's on the side of the people.
I do hear what you're saying. I will leave you with this. When I talk to voters out there, some who do not like all of Michael Bloomberg's record here in New York City, they'll point to stop and frisk. They do look at him and they say, hey, listen, I think he might be the best one to beat Donald Trump. They point to his money as part of that. So that is something.
Well, polls say otherwise. So I look forward to proving the case.
Oh, well, anecdotal versus polls. We'll see which one wins out. Briahna Gray. Briahna, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Katie.